Hi, yeah. So as I said, I'm Ali. I'm the R&D um, manager here at Telerix, and I'm going to talk about well, our new product, TissueReady Plus, but also with a little bit on the our uh, standard TissueReady as well. So I'm going to start just by going through who we are at Telerix, what we do, the science behind it, then move on to the product TissueReady and looking at some case studies that we've had done externally and go through the data with yourselves. So who are we at Telerix? We offer an innovative approach to the storage and transportation of biological material, so fresh cells, tissues and viruses. And our approach is to treat these cells as the fragile, sensitive, living entities that they are. And we do this by encapsulating them in an alginate-based hydrogel. And this protects these products from biochemical and physical damage, whilst also retaining viability and function without the need for harsh preservation methods such as cryopreservation. As I mentioned, our technology is based on alginate-based hydrogels, and this is derived from seaweed. These alginates are of pharmaceutical grade, are highly characterized and consistent. We have optimal formulations for different formats and different biological samples. So we have in tube formats for cells and for smaller bits of tissue. And then we have in whale format for doing assay ready models. And we also have larger formats like in a bag. We've streamlined the protocols for their use to make them easy and scalable and quick. So both steps of the protocol, the encapsulation, which provides the protection, takes around 10 minutes to do. And then on the other side, on the release side of things, it just involves using a self-friendly salt-based buffer. And again, 10 minutes, that's all you need for that step of the process. How does this, how do we achieve our preservation? Well, essentially we rely on hyperthermic temperatures. At these hyperthermic temperatures, metabolic and enzymatic processes slow down, essentially putting these cells into a hibernative state, putting them to sleep. And it is in this state that allows us to store and ship these biological products in sealed vessels. However, ordinarily, if you were to bring these cells down to hyperthermic temperatures, it would lead to the lipid membrane damage. So essentially what happens is the membrane is a kinetic fluid structure. And when you reduce the temperature, it goes into a static form, leading to protein deconfiguration, pore formation, and ultimately to cell death. And essentially what Telerix's products do is we encapsulate this membrane to prevent its deterioration and therefore extend the shelf life of these fresh biological products. Once you've achieved your preservation time or your shipment, the cells or tissues can be essentially reawoken upon returning to physiological temperatures, and then essentially these biological products are in the same state as what they were when they entered the storage. Here we just have a list of some of the cell types and tissues that we have successfully preserved using our technology. This is by no means the full list. If you have an interest in a different cell type or different tissue type that is not listed here, then please do get in contact and we'll be able to see what we've got. So what I'm going to talk to today is essentially about tissue preservation and our new product that will aid in getting superior, optimal tissue for your downstream processes. And so sort of the sensible place to start would be what are the problems with our current methodology of tissue preservation. Well, essentially, when you remove the tissue from when you retrieve the tissue from its source, be that, for example, a patient, the condition and viability of the tissue essentially decreases over time, which means that these any experiments, downstream processes, model generation need to be carried out as close to retrieval as possible, which could lead to complications because these sites of retrievals, usually hospitals, are not always near the site of the end user, the laboratories where these experiments or model generation activities are going to take place, meaning that by the time these tissues have got to these end sites, the condition has deteriorated somewhat from initial post-retrieval. There are different methods out there for the preservation or the shipment of tissue, but some distributors currently just essentially put these tissues into medium, into tubes, and ship them. So the image on the left here is essentially two samples of cancer tissue that we got very early on in the development of TissueReady Plus, and you can see that they're essentially just 2 bits of tissue thrown into a tube with medium in them. Therefore, the reason why we've developed TissueReady is to improve tissue preservation methods that would extend the time tissue could be used post-retrieval for various models such as cancer model generation, patient-derived organoid development, as well as advanced screening and personalized medicine. So I'd say this brings us on to TissueReady, and our first product. This is our already available base product. Essentially, this is the product that we have there for the preservation of tissue, organoids, spheroids, and microtissue. This comes in tube formats, 2 different sizes. And what we give you is essentially 3 different tubes. First tube would have gel-based beads. The second would have a concentrated version of gel A, which you would dilute yourself with a media of your choice. And then we'd also give you a vial with dissolution buffering. And the process is essentially as simple as what is shown on the screen here. You have your gel-based beads and your gel A, diluted gel A with medium. You combine these 2 together, and that starts the gelation process, at which point you add your tissue to the gel that is forming, which takes around 10 minutes. So you essentially need to add that tissue in there before the gelation is finished, because as the gelation is occurring, it will encapsulate the tissue. Once the gelation process is complete, your tissue is essentially stored. So it is in the tube, ready to go, and you can ship it out. You can do what you want to it. And then when you've achieved your preservation or your shipment, you can release using the cell-friendly salt-based buffer by simply injecting it into the gel, which will return it to a sort of liquid state, which you can then just retrieve your tissue from. And this is our new product, that TissueReady Plus. So TissueReady Plus, we have developed to have a pre-diluted, ready-to-use gel A with an optimized medium. So essentially what we're doing is we remove one of the steps where you would have to dilute gel A yourself, and we've worked to develop a medium that contains components that are optimal for cell and tissue preservation. As such, this product will give you optimal results without you having to do your own development on what medias to use with TissueReady. And process for encapsulation and release essentially remains the same, if not it's a step simpler, because you don't need to dilute your own gel A. You simply combine gel A to your beads and add your tissue to it, and then your encapsulation takes place, and the dissolution, the release, is essentially the exact same. So what advantages do you get with TissueReady Plus? As with all our technologies, it enables the preservation, in this case of tissue, at hyperthermic temperatures, with enabling long preservation and a long shelf life of the tissue. This enables the shipment of valuable and fragile tissues to further distances and enabling you to reach further globally and get these tissues in a better condition, in higher viable, higher quality condition to end users, to the labs, to get superior results and superior model generation. Additionally, you can get you get an increase in quality and yield of cells from tissue dissociation, again for model generation, and getting superior results to if you to just ship the tissue and media. And finally, you can use TissueReady to enhance the flexibility of your workflows. I used to isolate hepatocytes from liver, and you would regularly get the surgeon call at 9 o'clock at night on a Friday, and then you'd have to stay past midnight to complete your workflow. Whereas if you could just pause it, much more, I'm sure everybody would agree, it's much more preferable to come in on a Saturday morning and finish it, or even better, to come in on Monday morning and not sacrifice any of the quality of what you're producing at the end. So I'm just going to go through some of the case studies now. We have 3 case studies looking at slightly different things in each one, all with sort of external collaborators. The first one here is with a large CRO who essentially wanted to use TissueReady Plus for use with immunohistochemistry on frozen sections and give themselves some flexibility in the workflow and staffing, etc. So what they wanted to do was preserve, basically harvest the organs from the mouse, put it into TissueReady for 7 days. So they looked at different temperatures as well. So they found that refrigerated temperature is the best. And then after these 7 days, they released it using the solution buffer, and then took the tissue and froze it, sectioned it, and then processed it for H&E, which they have kindly provided us with the slides for. Their next step is obviously to go down to what their initial use, what the intended use is, which is for immunohistochemical staining. So here's the first result using the mouse kidney. So again, this is for 7 days at refrigerated temperatures, and we have the 3 images here for non-stored. So non-stored essentially are day 0. If you think about it, it's essentially when it's coming out of the mouse and it's processed straight away, as would be the standard workflow. The other ones are for 3 days in TissueReady Plus and 7 days of TissueReady Plus. And you can see from the H&E here that the structure remains intact and they are very comparable. They also did mouse liver, again, 7 days, refrigerated temperatures, same format here, non-stored, 3 days, 7 days. And you can see that the structure and morphology is retained between the non-stored and day 7, showing that TissueReady Plus is able to preserve their tissue for a week, and then they could go on and do their downstream processing from there without any effect on their end product. Our second case study is using cancer tissue, so doing the preservation of tumors. This was achieved with the help of a clinical pathology laboratory in a hospital by Novapath. And what they did was essentially the tumor gets removed from the patient. It is then sent to this pathology lab where they took the tissue and preserved it in TissueReady Plus. So they did this for 2 days at room temperature. And after these 2 days, it was released using a dissolution buffer. These tissues were then fixed, paraffin embedded, and sectioned. And then these slides were then stained such H&E, as well as immunohistochemistry, for A1, A3, as well as Ki-67. And then there was some in situ hybridization, as well as RNA isolation. And then these slides were assessed by a clinical pathologist who was blinded, who scored these sections and provided with slides as well as his interpretation. So here we have the first, which is of kidney tumor, and you can what we have on the bottom here is the H&E slides from the control. So our non-stored control, our day 0, essentially taking out the patient and then processed, paraffin embedded, etc. straight away. And then TissueReady Plus for 2 days. And then also we have a medium control here, which is just the tissue was left for the same amount of time as what TissueReady was, but just medium on its own, like what we saw in the earlier slide in a tube. So you can see that they're very similar between the control and TissueReady Plus here, as well as the medium. There's very little difference between H&E. Looking at the histological integrity score, so this is the scoring that the pathologist gave, and the scoring works out of 10, with 10 being perfect slide. It's comparable with, it is perfect for use for diagnosis, etc. Between 5 and 9, it's good enough quality. You can still use it for your downstream processes. It's good enough. Anything below 5, and you're starting to see, it's probably getting into the territory where you wouldn't want to use it. And what we can see is for non-stored, not surprisingly, we have that as a perfect score, 10 out of 10. TissueReady Plus, we're still within. There's not a sample that has gone below 5, so we're still in that usable section. Whereas if you leave it in media, some of the samples are starting to go below that usability, so showing that we're getting a bit more degradation with just media on its own. With the immunohistochemistry, we looked at 8183, which is a cytokeratin cocktail. That looks at all these different types of cytokeratins that are present in the cytoplasm of carcinomas. And then also Ki-67, which is for cells that are proliferating, which are present in sort of advanced cancers and more aggressive cancers. And again, we can see on the left of these panels, we have the controls, and on the right, we have 2 days in TissueReady Plus. And we can see that these are comparable. The staining isn't lost during the preservation period. Our next tissue for the cancer study was liver cancer, liver tumor. Again, similar format. We have H&E control on the top, our non-stored, our day 0, as well as 2 days in TissueReady Plus and 2 days in medium alone. You can see that control and TissueReady Plus are very comparable, whereas in medium is starting to you start to get artifacts here and there, and this is reflected in the histological integrity score. Non-stored being the perfect sample again. TissueReady Plus is sitting at around 9, with so very good quality slides. But medium alone, we're getting towards that cutoff point, the 5, where we're beginning any longer, and you're probably going to start to see some deterioration of the quality in the slide. This is just another liver sample. This is of a slightly more aggressive cancers, and again, you can see that the control and TissueReady Plus are very comparable, whereas the medium on its own, you again start to see some differences between the two. And again, immunohistochemical staining, A1, A3, comparable between the two. What should be coming up positive is coming up positive, and Ki-67, we can see more of that staining than we could in the kidney. So this is a more advanced, a more aggressive cancer. Our last sample was a esophageal tumor. Again, 2 days room temperature, similar format, non-stored at the top, TissueReady Plus and medium. See and then on the right here, the histological integrity score. Again, 10 out of 10 for the control. TissueReady still sitting comfortably in that usable region, and medium is on the cusp of the unusable region. So all of these H&E ones have shown that the integrity of the TissueReady is kept in that usable region. And once again, immunohistochemistry has kept the the staining is comparable between the control and TissueReady Plus slides for A1, A3, and Chi67. In addition to the immunohistochemical staining for esophageal tumor, we looked at in situ hybridization markers as well. So this was looking at HER2 and chromosome 17. And what we're looking for here are dots, tiny dots in the cell that are bound to these markers. So it should be black and red, and we can see that these markers are present in both the control on the left and the 2 days in TissueReady Plus on the right. So both previous case studies were looking at the sort of the structure of the slides that we get at the end as an indicator factor that the tissue is being preserved. This final case study is looking at more of a functional aspect of this and trying and isolating cells from preserved cancer tissue. And essentially it's an extension of case study 2, where tumor tissue was removed from the patient, processed at the clinical pathology lab, and put into and preserved in TissueReady Plus. This time for 4 to 5 days at room temperature. It was also shipped to an oncology research facility at the University of Sheffield. Here, after the preservation period, the tissue was released from TissueReady and then fixed. No, that was wrong. What I should say is that the cells are then isolated and expanded, and then these cells were fixed and stained for cytokeratin 7, which is a marker for the cancer cells on this. So what we have here is cells that were isolated from esophageal cancer tissue. On the left graph, we have cell viability. So essentially we're using this as an indicator of the quality of the cells that we're getting. And you can see that the non-stored, the day 0, they processed as soon as possible. We're sitting at around 80%. And then those that had been preserved for 4 to 5 days in TissueReady Plus are also looking very similar to that of the non-stored, whereas those that are just left in media for 4 to 5 days are showing around 45–50% viability. So we can see here that TissueReady Plus can improve the quality of the cell that you can get from tissue that have been preserved for 4 days compared to medium alone. The right graph is looking at the yield of the cells that we can receive, and you can see that the amount of cells from non-stored and TissueReady Plus are very comparable. And not only that, the distribution of cancer cells and normal or healthy cells is also comparable. So it's not like we're retaining the yield, but we're only retaining the yield of just the normal cells or just the cancer cells. We're able to get a similar distribution with the same method applied to both non-stored and TissueReady Plus stored tissue. Whereas when we look at the media on its own, you can see that we're losing cells in both the normal and the cancer cells. And this is just represented on the right here with some bright field images that show the top are non-stored, middle TissueReady Plus, and bottom media, where the brown cells are cytokeratin 7 positive cells or cancer cells, and those that are not are negative cells, are normal healthy cells. And you can see that we're seeing some strong staining in TissueReady Plus. We don't see that as much in the medium, only on the bottom. So essentially, what's the bottom line here? TissueReady Plus can be used to store and ship fresh tissue, retaining structure and viability. So we've shown this with H&E and immunohistochemistry staining to show that the structure is retained throughout preservation using TissueReady Plus. This can also be used with healthy and cancer tissue. And also we can use it on some functional side in looking at the isolation of cells. Additionally, it's worth noting that this process is quick and simple. So all these companies and facilities that have been helping us out with this study, we've essentially just given them the kits, given them a quick 5-minute tutorial, and they've been able to pick it up and carry out these studies without any help, and they've fed back that it's an easy process to do. And I've just reiterated these advantages of TissueReady, plus what we're able to do as a result of being able to extend the shelf life of these tissues, what that enables us to achieve in terms of shipping and improving the quality of our experiments and improving the quality of our tissue endpoints. And that's everything for me. So I'd like to thank you for joining the webinar and for listening. And I'll pass over to Lindsay with any questions that you may have.